Welcome everybody to Atlantic Beach Preservation's program on parking. Parking here at the beaches has been there we go. That makes a difference. Parking at the beaches has been somewhat of an issue. And so we have experts here on our panel, and I can guarantee you that at the end of the evening, when you leave, you are going to be smarter than when you came in, at least about parking. I can't guarantee anything else, but maybe other things will happen too. My name is Suzanne Barker. I'm chair of Atlantic Beach Preservation. We've been in existence since August 2016. We have many programs that we present, issues that are of concern of Atlantic Beach, not just Atlantic Beach, but our neighbors as well, Neptune Beach, that were joined at the hip. And so we have a lot of programs. We had one program last November about the dunes and how they protect us from hurricanes. We've covered lowering the speed limit for Mayport Road, and also about tree code here in Atlantic Beach. And so before we get started, I hope you all have a card and a pencil so that if you have questions for any of our panelists, that you'll be able to write it down, and we're going to collect that at the end of the presentation by the panelists. And so we'll get started, and let me introduce my co-chair, Maria Mark, and she'll take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Welcome. We are happy that you are here tonight. Obviously, we live here at the beaches. We are all part of these, hopefully part of the solution to finding a way to handle the parking at Beaches Town Center. Sometimes we are a victim of our own success, and that's where we are right now. So I have the pleasure of introducing the panel. We will let the panelists give their presentations, and then we will collect any cards where you may have questions. You can direct them to a particular panelist, or it can be to the general panel. To my far right, I have the pleasure of introducing Atlantic Beach Commissioner John Stinson. Commissioner Stinson took it on as one of his priorities to try and find a solution to the beaches town parking, as well as our parking here in Atlantic Beach and the challenges that we are facing as citizens for beach access. So he is now chair of the Parking and Pedestrian Safety Advisory Resource Committee. And I don't think it could be any longer than that. But he formed this committee back in September 2017. It's comprised of citizens of Atlantic Beach who have the same passion, expertise, and desire to find a solution to our parking issues. Next to Commissioner Stinson, we have Neptune Beach City Councilor Richard Arthur. He is also known as the parking guru for Neptune Beach, but he also chairs a committee called the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. A little shorter, but still nonetheless as important. Next to Councilor Arthur, we have Jay Handline. Jay has been tirelessly trying to work with the cities of trying to find the solution and common ground for the parking issues that we have. And he is president of the Beaches Town Center Agency. They oversee anything and everything that's going on at the Beaches Town Center. They do a great job, and we are really looking forward to hopefully finding that solution that works for everyone. And last but not least, we have Mark Rimmer. He's the one who's really tasked with the big job of finding those solutions. He's the parking consultant for the Beaches Town Center Agency. He works with RTA Consulting. So we will start the evening with a presentation from Commissioner Stinson. He will talk about not only, as I said, parking at Beaches Town Center, but also the issues that we're facing as residents in Atlantic Beach. So, Commissioner Stinson.
Got to be smarter than the microphone. So before I get started, I've got copies of this presentation for as many of you as I can. I'll just let you pass me back. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking. I don't want to bore you, but I do want to present some data. As Maria said, you know, that we all are aware of the parking issues in Atlantic Beach and beaches in general, and how that has continued to grow and become a bigger and bigger problem. And when I first moved to Atlantic Beach, I watched this and I watched it grow, and it was a passion of mine to try to find a solution, because I think there is a solution out there. Right after getting elected, it became one of my focuses to try to get the city of Atlantic Beach to put this parking committee together to try to dig deeper and find solutions that we thought would work for everyone. So September, the commission approved the parking committee and we started work. I'd like to recognize Ms. O'Bannon. She is one of our members. I don't see any of the other members in here at the present time, but very shortly we put together a presentation and a recommendation to the City Commission of Atlantic Beach to get on board with the City of Neptune Beach, the Beaches Town Center Agency, and the work that they had done related to this paid parking program. So with that, I'm going to give you a bunch of data, and I think most of the data that I'm going to talk to you about real quickly, you already know, but it just hasn't been put down in this way where you can look at it and you can kind of actually see the impact of it. And if I can make this slide thing work. So this is a study, and you know, pardon me, Jay, but I plagiarized the study that the Beaches Town Center did related to parking. And what's interesting, there were 2 or 3 things that I found very interesting. One was the amount of time people were driving to get to Beaches Town Center. And if you look on there, it's about 71% of the people drive 15 minutes or less. The other thing I found very interesting is that the people that live out here at the beach, very few, only 8% bike or walk to Town Center. So we as residents out here at the beach are kind of contributing to the problem when, if our cities are bikeable and walkable, maybe some of that problem is solved. So those were 2 notable things in the study, and Jay and Beaches Town Center did a good job putting it together. But those were 2 things that I really keyed in on. And so why that became important to me was this. I started thinking, okay, so if 15 minutes is what people were doing, I tried to figure out how far are they coming from. It becomes very important in the information I'm going to give you in just a second, but I just did a quick 15 minutes drive. That's about 10 miles, a 10-mile radius. So I said, okay, well, let's see what a 10-mile radius around the Beaches Town Center looks like. And this is it. Pardon the Google map, but basically we get just about to St. John's Town Center, 295, and northward. So it's mostly east of 295. That's where our visitors are coming from. Now, in a budget presentation that I did for the City of Atlantic Beach, this population thing sticks in my mind. So as I looked at that radius, I said, okay, where is that? And there are 3 zip codes. I wanted to quantify the amount of visitors and where they're coming and why this paid parking programs seem to make sense to me. 3 zip codes in Jacksonville: Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach, and Jax Beach. So I started studying all 6 of those. The City of Atlantic Beach, people don't really believe this, but our population has been almost flat since 2000. Varies very little. We had a dip in 2010 that you could probably attribute to the housing collapse, but if you look at the actual numbers, it's not a lot different. Jax Beach, they've had a little bit of increase in growth, but don't get too excited about that because it's not a lot. It's about 2,500 people. So their city's not changing much. And then you look at Neptune Beach. And Neptune Beach is as flat as well. In fact, from 2000 to 2017, I think there's about 30 or so difference in population. This is census data that can be verified on the internet. And depending on which website you look, they're maybe 30 or 50 off one way or the other, but they're really, really close. What that told me is the demand that we're placing on the parking out here isn't coming from us. It's coming from somewhere else. Now that's important because you're paying for it. You're paying to maintain it, you're paying to enforce it, you're paying to keep it up, and you're dealing with all the issues that come with that. So here's the first one of the zip codes in Jacksonville, 32224, and they've had about, I don't know, 12,000, 13,000 growth over the same time period, and that's in the radius of how far people are willing to travel. And if you think about the radius, I don't know about you guys, but it's rare that I drive to San Marco or Riverside to eat or do anything. It's too far for me. I don't want to drive that far. I'm not over the ditch back and forth. That term kind of bothers me, but I don't do that much. And so this makes sense that people wouldn't do that coming this way either. And I'm not sure that, I didn't have a chance to talk to the Chamber of Commerce, but I don't think it's visitors from out of state. 32225, same thing. They had about 7,000 or 8,000 growth over the same time period. And then the last one, 32246, had about 15,000. So we know where all the people that are coming, that are increasing the demand on the parking here in Atlantic Beach and Neptune Beach and Jax Beach. They're coming from over the bridge and coming because we have wonderful restaurants, because the town center and the cities have done a great job of making us an attractive destination for people to come and spend their Saturdays and their Sundays and their times at the beach. So keep that in your head as we keep going. Just real quick, the total population of the area, the 6 zip codes, is about 175,000 or 100, maybe 200,000, somewhere in that range. But here comes the big one. There's Duval County, which is Jacksonville. And a lot of those people are going to take Saturdays and Sundays to come to the beach as well. So I put the numbers in there so you can see. Atlantic Beach has had about 0.6% change, Jax Beach 11%, and Neptune Beach about 1%. And all the other growth comes from the other zip codes. Now, why is that important? Again, I said a minute ago, you guys pay for all this. We provide it. We provide an amenity and a service to people that come here and visit. We don't want to discourage them to come visit. But this became very important to me and the parking committee because we were told by the beach nourishment people that we could not do anything that gave residents any kind of preferential treatment because it had to be fair across the board. But I think fair across the board is recognizing the fact that you guys as taxpayers here actually pay to take care of this stuff. It's landscape, it's maintenance, it's enforcement, there's lost revenue. You stop and think about sales tax that we might have collected, the parking fees that we may collect. There's all kinds of costs that I think if we had a 10 or 15-minute conversation with you guys, you could throw up all kinds of ideas that here's a revenue we may be losing that would help us offset some of those costs. And then the beach, right? We have people that run up and down the beach picking up trash, putting out trash cans that are on fire, stopping a fight, collecting the dog that's running loose. Atlantic Beach is a very dog-friendly community, maybe a little better than the others, but we still have to manage the dog population when it's on the beach. Enforcement. And then we have this beach and dune restoration thing, right? That's always hanging out over our head that I keep being told you can't do anything with parking, you can't do anything because of this. If you do, you're jeopardizing the Corps of Engineer funding and the state funding that goes along with this beach dune restoration money that we get. But there's a cost associated with that, correct? So now let's talk a little bit about the geography, and don't mind the miles. I got this off of Google, and it's going to be a little back and forth. But the Cedar Atlantic Beach from Atlantic to Hannah Park has 2.5, 2.6 miles. If you take it to 18th Street, which is where the beach nourishment contract stops, it's about 1.6 miles. I have the city of Jax Beach at 4 miles and Neptune Beach at 1.3, and again, that's Google. That's their number, not mine. The important thing is we have 2 central commercial districts. Between those 3 cities, we have the town center that separates Atlantic Beach and Neptune Beach. We have the town center that Jax Beach has, and I don't want to be remiss in mentioning that we have Maple Road, which the city of Atlantic Beach is trying to revive. We have Atlantic Boulevard, we have A1A, and we have Beach Boulevard. Now I'm giving you all kinds of things that you already know. But I'm just trying to put it together in a story for you. Real quick now, back to the beach nourishment. Here's some numbers that came along from Olson and Associates. In 2014, Olson Associates, the contractor that actually performs and supervises the beach dune restoration, said the city of Atlantic Beach had 390 parking spots. Well, in 2015, the city of Atlantic Beach's Public Works Department went down and did a study, and they came out and said we had 204. Our parking committee has just finished an inventory going up and down the beach and up and down all the streets within about half a mile of the beach, and we have identified 220 spots that are actual spots marked, available for people to use. We've also figured out we have 292 spots that are unmarked that the public is using currently, and we think there's about 115 spots that are not marked that could be used, depending on the city's using the right-of-ways to provide this parking. While that's important, for the 1.6 miles of beach that we have that requires dune, that we get dune restoration funding for, that requires 160 spots. So what that tells me is we have 204 minimum. We can probably do something with parking to manage it a little bit better. So the solutions. I think this paid parking thing for Beaches Town Center makes great sense. It helps the cities offset some of the costs that you guys as taxpayers are funding for the visitors that come. I think it improves access and availability. I think there will be turnover of spots, and I've seen studies that say 2 spots on every block ought to be the vacancy at any given time. I don't know if that's right. Mark and Jay could probably speak more about that, but I think it makes sense. And it's an expandable program, and let's start using some system like this to manage this parking. And let's give the citizens of the cities that are paying for all of this some kind of reduction in rate of what you pay. And I don't know how that works. I know the 2 cities are working hand in hand. The city manager for Neptune Beach and the city manager for Atlantic Beach are talking. The city of Neptune Beach is taking the lead, and Atlantic Beach has kind of stepped back and saying, you guys take the ball and run with it. And Joe Garrity's comment was, send us a check. So, and we're very thankful, because this group actually has been working this a lot longer than I have. But better management of parking throughout the city of Atlantic Beach means several things. Definition, we need to know where the parking's at. We also need the people that are coming here to know where it's at. We need to know what kind of parking it is. Is it golf carts? Is it bicycles? Is it cars? What is it? We need to get on board as cities. We need to get on board with the beach buggy thing that the town center agency has put together. And the cities need to support that, because I have used it. They'll pick you up at your house. They'll take you to 11 South and let you eat. You call them, they come pick you up, and they take you to Royal Palms. You have a glass of wine, they pick you up and they take you home. It's a free service, you tip the driver, and it's a great thing, and the cities need to support it. Delineation, we need to, how are we going to alert the users that these spaces are there? Because I don't want them circling, town center. I don't want them circling our beach access points. I don't want them driving to 18th Street and back, and 18th Street and back, trying to find a spot. And so we gotta make sure that people know how to find this parking and know that there's a space available over here. There's not over there. This is where I'm going to go. And then we have to clearly mark it, because our beach nourishment contract says if it's not marked, it doesn't count. And if it's not clearly marked, then the visitors that come to town don't know where they need to park. And then we need to enforce it. I think the enforcement mechanism that perhaps Mark has got included in his presentation will be very interesting to you. It seems to be very seamless, and you get a lot of options in how you enforce it, but at least it's there. So a couple other solutions that I'd like to mention, and I brought this out in the visioning process that the City of Atlantic Beach did here a while back, and that's a boutique parking garage. I think there's an opportunity for a boutique parking garage in town center. It takes a public-private partnership. I haven't gotten a long ways down the road about making that happen, but I think there's ways to put in a parking garage that doesn't look like a parking garage, that there are shops and boutiques and coffee shops and all kinds of things around the bottom, and it looks a lot more like hawkers than it does the old-time parking garages you see in downtown Jacksonville. Let's see. We need to think about one-way streets. You have one-way streets, you can open up parking on one side or the other. The City of Fernandina Beach does this very well in their downtown area. You've got one-way street this way, then a one-way street that way, and a one-way street. People get used to it very quickly, and it opens up one side of the street for parking without blocking driveways and encroaching upon right-of-ways. And then we have the right-of-way issue. That's going to have to be resolved, and there's some pretty harsh ways to do that. There's some pretty unique ways to do that. but we need to figure out what we're going to do with the right-of-ways. And is that parking that we want to try to use to try to accommodate some of the traffic that's coming to our cities. So with that, I'm going to close. I think it's important to understand that we're going to have to invest in parking in some way, shape, or form. We're going to have to manage it and maintain it. And what that looks like, I think, is up to not just the two cities and the Beaches Town Center Agency. It's up to you guys. After all, we work for you. And if it's something that you think makes sense, you need to let us know. If it's something you don't like, you need to let us know. Because if we don't know what you think, we don't know which way to proceed. And then last, I want to say, I think it's going to be important that we all realize that we're all going to have to compromise. I'm not going to get everything I want. You won't get everything you want. The cities won't get everything they want. Beaches Town Center won't get everything they want. That's what compromise is. It's going to take compromise. We're going to have to give a little. There's going to be things we don't like. There's going to be things we do like. But if in the end of the day, it improves the parking and reduces the congestion, and it makes our cities bikeable, walkable, much more enjoyable to get out and about in, I think it makes good sense. So with that, I'm going to close, and I hope I didn't overrun my 10 or 15 minutes, and thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we'll make up for time. I don't have a prepared presentation. Briefly, just kind of go through the points, my perspective from Neptune Beach. I actually grew up in Atlantic Beach, so I am welcome here, I think. Grew up on 19th Street, so I'm familiar with the parking along that street in that area. I remember, the days of Silver's drugstores and Hickson's on the corner and the surf shop, and riding my bike. Worked at the Loop during high school. So I didn't really recognize a parking problem back then. I got involved with the city 14 years ago now. I'm in my second term. This is my 8th year as a city councilor. Prior to that, I was on the Planning Development Review Board, which is a commercial variance board that looks at town center and what's going on down there. When I started, we basically had Papa Joe's on the corner, and that's what was going on in town center. And so it really wasn't, parking wasn't really an issue. And I think today it's been because of town center agency and what we've created down there. The demand from people coming from Ponte Vedra that don't want to eat in strip malls, people in Jack's Beach that just want to kind of get out of Jack's Beach. So I wouldn't call myself the parking guru. I would say I'm termed out and people are throwing the pay for parking on me. So I'm fine with that. I believe in the pay for parking program. Just stepping back a little bit, I believe that Atlantic Beach in town center has 63 spaces, I believe. We made a push this year to build more spaces in Neptune Beach in the right of way. We'll finish up in a couple weeks with about 200 spaces total for what we have. Majority of the parking is actually privately owned, right behind Neptune Beach City Hall, where they do the valets and drop off. That's all privately owned. City Hall actually owns probably 6 spaces down there, which is a big misconception. People say, why are they doing valet in this area? And South Coast Capital actually owns all that. So, and I'll get into that for the pay for parking solution, as I would call it, in a minute. So I would say a few years ago we started to recognize the demand and the need for parking. We took a movement of doing a 50% reduction for the businesses in Central Business District, which goes from Atlantic to Orange Street. So whether you're a coffee shop, restaurant, office space, we gave them a 50% reduction in the parking spaces because we had capped our growth. We'd reached, our maximum of what the potential was for people to put businesses in there, unless there was some sort of variance given. That was probably 6 or 7 years ago now. I've argued with Jay, or had discussions about when the actual pay for parking program started. I'd say it's 10 years ago or more now. The pay for parking program came out of a recommendation from a council that was put together to look at the problem down here. And I think it's gotten traction now because of the technology and how it's changed. When we first were looking at it several years ago, you're talking about a pay and display ticket system, put money in a machine and that's what you have. it didn't really get much traction because of how it was designed. And I would argue that there's a pay-for-parking system today. It's a fractured system. It's privately owned. You've got several different entities, private entities, doing pay-for-parking, different times. You've got lots that are open, vacant all day long, like 2nd and Lemon Street with 60 spaces in there. And you look at it, and it's privately owned. What's the deal? Seahorse Motel, their lots are vacant all day long while you're driving around looking for spaces. So the pay-for-parking, what I call solution, for me, number one, is to open up all those parking spaces so you have one system, almost like a public utility, that everyone can tie into. The system today, you can do license plate recognition system. And so everything, you don't have a permit, you're not putting stickers on cars, you're not putting money in a machine and putting a sticker in your window, you don't have tickets and trash floating around the city. You can pay on an app, you can pay at a kiosk. You have a vehicle that drives around, a golf cart with a mounted unit on the front that just scans license plates, and they just drive around constantly. It's feeding information back. It's geolocated on your space, so whether South Coast owns that space, Atlantic Beach or Neptune Beach owns the space, the revenue from that goes to the proper location on that. So my goal with that system is to bring down all the lots and include everyone in it, so you have the kiosk on public right-of-way, and everyone can tie into it. So we're starting with Atlantic, Neptune Beach. South Coast is interested. Once the major spaces tie into it, then others, I believe, will follow. Like, the Seahorse Motel is interested in it. 201st Street, and there's only a few people that own the majority of the spaces. So once that's available, we can bring the cost down for the whole operation, the contracts under Neptune Beach. We can bring the economies of scale together, bring the cost down. There'd be a rating board that would decide the rates, made up of Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach, and the private entities. The private entities can do their own rates how they want it. It's their lots. They can put a rate out there, whatever they want to do. The deal with the rates is really to influence the behavior of the turnover of spaces. It's not there to gouge anybody, and it's not there, if the spaces are vacant all day long, then there shouldn't be a high rate on it because there's no reason to charge it. It's only when during the peak hours and Friday, Saturday, 6 p.m. or so, that you want to create the turnover in those spaces. So the goals of the rates to create the turnover and the vacancy, that there's a space there when you want it, a 10% vacancy or so. And people say, well, I won't go down there because I won't pay. Well, people say they don't come down here now because they can't find a space. So, that's the other side of the argument. The revenue side, well, just to close out the kiosk system, the goal, like I said, is to put a system together with the technology we have today, and Mark can talk about that would open up all those spaces. So 2nd and Lemon Street, South Coast Capitol, Seahorse Motel. Now you don't have a fractured parking system. You have one seamless system that's totally integrated, that doesn't look like there's 20 different kiosks and systems and valet and this guy over here and that. The goal is to make it one system. If we don't do this now, there are private companies that will come into an area like this, recognize the value and the assets of the parking space for a bank or such or wherever, and they'll go to the bank and say, look, you have dormant equity in your assets sitting here, and we can turn those over and we'll do a pay-for-parking system on it, and we'll share revenue with you. And they recognize that, and the bank or whatever private entity, the Slayman Centers, the Stricken Centers, whatever, they'll go with these private entities and make it more fractured, and now the city has no control over anything. So I think it's time to do this now and bring everyone together while we still have control over it. So the license plate recognition system, it's an interesting system now. It's just a barcode scanner that drives around and scans the plates. We're trying to put together a system that has one enforcement person. They can enforce all the lots, so you don't have a fractured system there. Getting back, so that's the first point on it, is to really create a parking management and a parking solution on that side of it. The revenue piece that's talked about, I think, is secondary. The facts that I look at in Neptune Beach is that the Better Jacksonville Plan money is going away. There's a sunset, there's a horizon on the half-cent sales tax. We'll continue to pay it, but it's going to go towards the county pension fund, which is great for them, but it's right now we get about $600,000 at Neptune Beach from the Better Jacksonville half-cent sales tax. We use that for roads, improvements, and that's a lot because that's about 10% of our budget. So when you look at that sunsetting and going away, I mean, you have to plan for that in the future. And what we do with that, I mean, that's really to maintain town center for the people that come down here and enjoy it. People from Duval County, people from Palm Beach. So in order to maintain the quality of town center for those people to come down and enjoy, I mean, they're taking away the money that we're using to improve and the roads and everything down there and not giving us anything to replace it with. So how are we supposed to maintain the quality and improve town center when that 10% of the budget goes away? So the revenue side, there is a revenue cost for that will be allocated towards the enterprise fund, and that fund will be designated towards those improvements, streets, roads, town center. The revenue from the pay for parking will not go towards, pensions or salaries or bonuses or anything like that. It's really designed to set up to replace the money that's going away from that program. The citizen permitting side, we've looked at, we're getting to that now, whether it's a 50% reduction, kind of looking at something now where the citizen will pay a fee a year, a nominal fee, $10, $15, whatever it is, for a virtual permit, and that'll get you a virtual parking permit. And there'll be a zone for citizens that's where they can park. It may be way on the outside, but that's where looking at something like that, that sort of model. So there'll be a free parking, more or less, but it'll be in a specific lot or area. So getting back into the revenue side, I mean, that's what we're looking at. That's the system. Hopefully, we've presented it several times as a package to the city council. We've workshopped it for about a year. And I'm hoping in the next 3 months or sooner, I would hope in the next 30 or 45 days, we can actually submit the entire system, what we're trying to do, for approval. We've approved a vendor, we've approved the technology, we've approved everything about it. There's just 4 real major elements about it: the management, the enforcement, the rates, and the citizen permitting. Those are the 4 pieces left. So that's what we're working on. We hope to have that finished in the next 45 days. So it can be rolled out. Originally it wanted to be rolled out for summer, spring and summer. Don't know how that is in timelines, but that's where we are. So that's all I have, and I will hand it off to Mr. Handline now.
Sure. I'll take it from here. I'm going to try to qualify like Mr. Arthur just did. I've been a member of the Beaches community now since 1976. I was a member of Community Presbyterian Church. I've lived in Atlantic Beach as well as in Neptune Beach. I run a business in Ponte Vedra today, a business consulting group. So due to that period of time that I've lived in the area, I think I can make a quote that's pertinent. Joni Mitchell, some of you may recall, is a singer-songwriter who once penned a lyric. They paved paradise and they put up a parking lot. Well, paradise, as I remember, it was La Vida Lounge. And the parking lot is now the Seahorse parking lot, on the opposite corner of what Mr. Arthur recalls as Papa Joe's. So I go back a few years, and I've watched our community grow. And I feel a certain amount of responsibility and dedication to our corner and to our community. My wife and I raised 2 children. My former wife and I raised 2 children here who are now in their 30s and working on their families elsewhere. But whenever they come home to visit, the Beaches Town Center is the very first place that they go to sort of get their bearings. I have a picture of my two girls on my knee at the very first Dancing in the Street event. And those are fond memories that I have that I'm sure many of you have. So the preservation of those experiences and those memories are very important to all of us. And being good custodians and stewards of what exists today and what it might become tomorrow, such that it can be shared not only by us, but with our children and with our grandchildren. It's a very important role that we all have. I've been a member of the Beaches Town Center Merchants Association and the Town Center Agency for well over 10 years now, collectively. And I've been an active participant as we have a business here in the town center, which is why I'm in front of you today. There were a number of events that took place. I think a little bit of context, in addition to what Mr. Stinson, Mr. Arthur has already offered, is helpful because it gives you foundation and it helps you to understand that the actions that were just shared with you, they didn't happen in a vacuum. They were developed over a long period of time where a lot of study and discovery and exploration went into the process. As a business consultant, I was involved in a research project in St. Augustine, which required my participation in the planning of the St. Augustine Municipal Garage. I also have a business in San Marco, where I was an active participant in the planning of the Business Overlay District in the parking redesign of a project that was known as San Marco by Design. And it was through those efforts where I came in contact with Mr. Rimmer on my left here, who was engaged with RTA Consulting and another design group in San Marco, Envision Design, that worked on the mobility services, transportation, and parking plan as part of that business overlay district in San Marco. We actually formed, and I recently had shared a conversation with some of you that are sitting here tonight about when we formed our first parking task force as it relates to the effort that we've been involved in for the past 6 years in 2012. But that wasn't the first time that actually a parking study was done in the Beaches Town Center. We actually had the original parking task force was formed in 2004. And recommendations were made to both cities at that point in time relative to areas of demand, areas of potential problems that might continue to erode, and some action that we felt was needed to be taken at that point in time. Some of those recommendations were made and some of them were not, unfortunately, because the problem continued to evolve. Up until 2012, when we had a series of acts that locked down one of the private lots that had been open to everyone for general parking, and which sort of triggered this whole process. When that lot became secure and general parking was no longer going to be allowed and it was going to be reserved for the tenants of that property owner, which obviously was within their right, it changed the dynamic of, well, where is everybody going to park now throughout the town center? So it put the Merchants Association into a state of action, and we tried to conceive of solutions on our own, and we quickly realized that this was not something that we were going to be able to take on by ourselves. We formed the task force, and then after we formed the task force, we made a motion that it made sense for us to hire a parking consultant. And that's when we reached out to Mr. Rimmer and Mr. Skiles, and we asked them if they would work alongside of us and do a parking study and evaluate the extent of the parking challenge that we had here in the town center, and help us to idea some recommendations and see if we couldn't put a plan into place. So I'm going to kind of give you a timeline relative to how this actually occurred. With the outcome, at least as we envision it, being one that we could create a vision plan that wouldn't be something that would be just short-term related, but would be something that we would be able to put in place that would meet our needs, not just today, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And that part of that vision plan was that we were going to have to come up with a shared parking solution. We have limited resources here, and I think both John and Richard spoke to that. There's only so much development that can occur, and then there's only so much parking that is available today. And we need to be careful not to live up to those words by Joni Mitchell. We don't want to pave paradise and put parking lots everywhere. We do know through our effort and through our study that there is enough existing inventory of parking that if we manage it appropriately, that we'll be able to deal with the demand that exists today. So we move beyond parking and into a mobility services plan, which necessitates us taking a look at flow of traffic. It necessitates us taking a look at means of transportation. You know, cars are not the only means of transportation. I believe Mr. Stinson spoke to the various types of transportation that we have available to us. We can take the bus, and we can bicycle into town. We're putting up more bicycle racks so we can get the bicycles off of the palm trees and into the racks. We're offering buggy and shuttle services. We have been able to have the wonderful experience of entering into a parking relationship with the owners of Beachside Buggies. Mr. Chenoweth is sitting with us here today. If anyone has any questions relative to the Beachside Buggies program, Mr. Stinson spoke very well to what they're serving to our two communities, both at Neptune Beach and Atlantic Beach. We're looking at ways that we can incorporate low energy vehicles, golf carts, scooters, and introduce them into the footprint such that we can move the services around and create less demand for parking. Those all move into that mobility services part of the plan, but as we moved forward, after we formed the task force and then we reached out to Mark and to Doug to do the study, they entered into their initial study and made their initial observations and findings in April of 2013. We've been on this now for 6 years. We came up with a parking survey, which Mr. Stinson guided us on, where we studied all of us at point of sale through all the merchants throughout the Beaches Town Center. And through the results of that study and through our own observations relative to the demand, recommendations and ideas that were delivered by Mr. Rimmer and his team were submitted. We reviewed those recommendations with both the Neptune Beach City Council and the Atlantic Beach Commission. We've been in front of both the council and the commission on numerous occasions as we tried to institute the recommendations of that plan. Some of the recommendations sounded like this. We knew that the biggest issue that we had then and that we have today, it still exists, is employee parking. At any given time, there are over 200 employee cars that are available to park in and around the Beaches Town Center. We felt like if we addressed that problem, that challenge early on, that we might be able to come up with an immediate short-term solution that would be beneficial and that would help. So we began the process of trying to gather parking inventory, and we went around the community on the periphery of the town center, and we asked for help and support. We came here to Community Presbyterian Church, and the church was gracious enough to go ahead and work with us and allow us to enter into a contract in April of 2014 that allowed us to use your lot so that we could have both employee and valet parking available here at the church at Community Presbyterian. We did the same thing at Neptune Baptist Church. We did the same thing at the Bank of America. We did the same thing with what is now Ameris Bank in the Kmart parking lot. We were able to generate over 400 parking spots that were available to us as part of the parking inventory for off-site satellite parking. We looked at that as a win. There are challenges with trying to have employees parking outside of the perimeter of the central business district. There are safety issues, there are security concerns, there's inclement weather. So we saw the need to go ahead and provide shuttle services. That's when we first approached the Beachside Buggies people and asked them if they would work with us in collaboration relative to providing a safe ride for the employees that were to park in those locations. We began to look at alternative sites. We approached the property owners for Kmart. We approached the SunTrust Bank. We approached all the professional buildings on the west side of 3rd Street. So we have a great deal of parking inventory that is available to us, some of which has some challenges for us. They're not all active today because we've only needed to activate half of that relative to our inability to move the employees off of the main footprint within the central business district. That's why the paid parking, limited parking program that Mr. Arthur spoke to is important. We believe that when that parking program goes into effect, and it was actually one of the recommendations that we made early on, that we needed to not just have employee satellite parking, but we needed to have an enforced short-term parking solution put into place so that we could get the employees to recognize that they needed to park in the satellite parking and that there wasn't an enforcement piece behind that would incent them to park there, that could become a reality. If we can open up 200 parking spaces within the central business district, that's a win. We're looking for flow. We're looking for the opportunity for all of us to be able to go into the town center, whenever that may be, or to have our friends and our family and our neighbors come and our visitors and find parking when they go down into the town center. That's a fabulous start for us. After we were able to actually create all that inventory, we began the process of trying to work on the second part of the initiative, which was a combined valet service for the Beaches Town Center. At one time, we had 3 different valet operations that were going on in the town center at the same time. We were able to consolidate that into one. However, as you have heard previously, it is pretty much controlled by South Coast Capital. So we have limited flexibility relative to what we would like to achieve, although we have made some improvement. Valet is available to everyone regardless of where they go. I think we can still make great strides on that. We believe that is part of our study and part of the work that we can do on a go-forward basis as part of a parking management plan, that we can improve the staging of that valet service and the capability that we have along with it. But we do believe that a number of the recommendations that we made as it related to on-street parking, parking limitations relative to the number of hours that you can park there. If you think about it today, there's a good amount of traffic that takes up those parking spaces. If you have an employee that parks in front of one of the businesses and they have a work shift of 6 to 8 hours, that car's not moving for 6 to 8 hours. We'd like to have that employee park in the satellite space. We'd like to have all of our visitors that come down to use our beach to park in a space that we've allocated and that we've indicated is for beach parking. And we can make shuttle services available to them to move them from that parking lot down to the beach access points, and make it a very user-friendly experience, but get that car off of the central business district and get it into a satellite parking location where it creates that flow that we're looking for. So it's that parking management plan that we're looking for, where we can have a shared parking solution that makes sense. It really necessitates that all the stakeholders work together. And I want to take a little bit of time here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rimmer. The stakeholders are all of us that sit in this room. It's the residents of both beach communities, it's the municipal government, it's the property owners, and it's the merchants. And we look at all those stakeholders as being important in this challenge that we have relative to trying to find a parking management solution that meets all of our needs. So as we conducted this study and we began to evaluate what we could do that would benefit everyone, we took all that into consideration. We're concerned about the fact that the success of the town center is creating this, what the perceived logjam. There's a lot of parking available here. It just needs to be managed effectively. And we need to get that word out into the community that there actually is parking, that it is being managed effectively, and that when you come to visit, that you'll be able to find parking in a very easy and user-friendly manner. We don't want to see parking log jams. We don't want to see spillover or creep into the residential community. We've worked with both cities relative to offering our assistance to whatever it is that we can do as a merchants association or an agency to assist with preventing that from occurring. So we think that all the mobility services planning that we're doing right now can benefit the residential area by keeping any spillover and any creep out of the neighborhoods. That's important to us. We all have to work in partnership. We all have to work in collaboration. We have to share our limited resources. And if we do so in a very smart and a diligent manner, we believe that we can have a much more effective experience than the one that we've been having. So we continue our effort, and we're making headway. There is new parking that's been made available across the Beaches Town Center footprint. The city of Neptune Beach has created a number of new parking spaces. Commissioner Stinson just outlined for us the opportunity for us to create additional parking spaces in the city right away in Atlantic Beach. We're constantly looking at, there was a reference to boutique parking garages. I can list 6 different studies that we've made relative to whether or not that could be a potential space or a location for a parking garage with a mixed use type of experience like Commissioner Stinson described. But until that point in time where something like that might become a reality, there's enough parking inventory here today for us to work with that if we manage it properly, we can all benefit from. With that being said, I think I would like to stop now and ask Mr. Rimmer to take over and maybe give a little bit more background into what he found when he conducted the study, why he made the recommendations, and what is behind that given all the background and experience that he has.
Thank you. When I was first brought on by the agency, it was actually through the Merchants Association, and the focus of what they were looking at was their customer parking. And the big complaint was there was no place for any of their customers to park. Well, I couldn't see that because most of the parking was full, so someone was parking there. So after a few days of observation, I noticed most of the spaces were starting to fill up before any of the businesses opened. And that was from several different groups. One was employees, that was a big one. Another one was people going to the beach, which those are visitors to the area, possible customers later. And then there were cars that were left there overnight, and those were hotel guests. So those were the 3 things that was the low-hanging fruit to figure that out. And then I also noticed a lot of the problem with the traffic in the area. I just set up shop on one of the corners down by ragtime and just stood there for about an hour. I saw the same cars pass by me 6 or 7 times. So it was just people cruising, circling, looking and everything. So the perception of how much traffic there was a little off as well. But the reality of it was still there was a parking problem. And so what we tried to look at, and I'm not going to go through all the different meetings and discussions and everything, but at the end of the day, we broke it down to we had to look at and solve the parking problem for the customers, the employees, the visitors, those coming down recreation, go to the beach or anything, and the residents. And it's, when you do things like this, if the idea is, as an example, we don't want the employees parking right in the core area anymore, well, that's an easy thing to say, but you gotta, so where are we gonna send them? You gotta give them a place to go. If we don't want the visitors that are going to the beach parking in all the on-street spaces so customers can't go into the businesses, where are we gonna tell them to go? And it's a puzzle. It's just all these moving parts. And one of the things that complicated it a lot down here, which Mr. Stinson referred to, was the beach renourishment program. And it used to be that the way the rules worked was when you got your funding, you identified spaces within a quarter mile of different beach access points. And those spaces had to be available on an equal basis to the general public, period. So if I identified a space that was right in front of your house as one of those spaces, you could not save that space. Anybody had the right to park there at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I couldn't change that. Well, the state and the federal government came to their senses. I think it was in 2015, maybe 14, 15, and changed that to where the spaces still have to be available, but now we have the ability to control and put controls in place on those spaces. We had a lot of discussion with Tallahassee on this, just making sure what that meant. But basically, it was now a city has the ability to charge for some spaces, put time limits on spaces, give special consideration to residents on some of those spaces. So that changed everything on what we could do. So now you could actually look at putting together a management program. And I want to clarify something. All of this is a much bigger management program than just the right in the center where we're talking about paid parking. So I prefer to call it a management program that includes paid parking as part of that. Another big part of it is, as they've referenced, is the buggies. And that actually is a unique program that I think you're going to see in a lot of places, because to be able to tell your residents, look, just don't even drive. We'll pick you up at your front door, take you there, and come and get you when you're ready to go home. And you can't beat that. That's not available to those people who live in that 10-mile radius. That's only available in a certain geographic area, which is the residents. So between the beach renourishment program changes and then some advances in technology, we were able to identify a management system where we would be able to manage both the on-street public spaces, the private parking lots, residential zones, beach access zones, validation programs for merchants, the hotel parking spaces, valet, all of it through one single system. I'm not going to get into telling you how it all does that, but it's through a license plate recognition. And what it does is, as an example, as a resident, you would register as a resident. It would, if you're parked in one of the zones Richard referred to, and it saw your license plate there, it would tell the system, oh, that's a resident, they park there, they don't have to pay the kiosk. The kiosk system, what is neat about this, we've identified 12 spots within the town center where we would place these kiosks, and that would be it. For every parking space in the entire town center, you're talking 12 kiosks. So you're not going to have every lot having all these signs all over it. You're not going to have something in front of every parking space on the street or anything. So we avoid sign pollution, which was a big buzzword when this was all going on. And what you'll be able to do is wherever you park, anywhere in there, you can go to a kiosk and pay. You can pay on your phone. If you're going to a merchant or a restaurant, you can go in and just tell them you parked. You give them their license plate number. They can do your validation right there. You don't have to go back to your car and put anything on it. The system can be set up that if you're a repeat visitor and you come here often, you can register with it, and it'll send you an alert and tell you either, hey, your time is up in 15 minutes or, whatever, to let you know, so you're not going to get stuck getting a ticket or anything like that. One of the other key things people ask me a lot about is the enforcement component of it. And everybody sees people coming around writing tickets and all that. And what our plan is it's a little friendlier than that. One is the way the system works is there's a cameras mounted on a golf cart. And they've advanced to the point where you can drive at speed down a street and it'll pick up the plates. And what will happen when they come to a stop at the end of the street or after going through a lot, it will tell the driver if there were any vehicles in that area that were in violation. If there aren't, they move on. If there are, and they say it was this license plate, he'll go back to that license plate. And our plan is that, one, everybody deserves a chance. So if it's the first time you get a violation or anything like that, all you're going to get is a notice telling you, hey, you overstayed, you forgot to pay, please, these are the rules. Here's the website you can go to understand our parking program, or a number you can call. If you are in violation, and it's not your first time, what you would get is you would not get a ticket, we would issue you an invoice. So if it's, let's just say the parking is for around $5, okay, you would get a notice on your car, say, hey, you didn't pay the kiosk, as long as you pay by such and such a time, whether it's close of business, midnight, whatever, we're all good. Here's all the different ways you can pay. And then you can pay right at the kiosk. If you do get a ticket and it becomes a citation, you can still pay it online, at the kiosk, anything. You're not going to have to make a special trip anywhere or anything. So we're trying to make it as convenient and as easy and give you as few excuses as possible for not being in the system. The program will allow us to pre-sell parking. So if a merchant is having a certain event or anything, they can send you, like if you're coming down for an appointment, they can give you a code. So when you come down and park, you just punch in your license plate number and that code, either on the app or on the machine, and you're good. You don't have to worry about it. The system will allow property owners and merchants to make their own arrangements on validations. So if I own a parking lot and I want to let the ice cream shop customers park for free on my lot and I want everybody else to pay, the validation system will take care of that. I mean, there's so many things that you can do with this system. You can sell season passes for parking, for beach access, and it's all virtual. So as a resident, if you're having a guest coming in, you can register a guest's car. So if there's a resident-only parking zone and your uncle or kids are visiting, and it goes down the street, and that car from Arizona, you know, the system will know, oh, that's a visitor, so they're good, kind of. It's just the technology has advanced so much in the last 4 years that we can do all these things. The other great thing about it is the system. This particular system is what they call an open architecture, which allows us to interface with multiple other systems. So as things change, new situations come up, new technology comes along, we'll be able to interface with it, and you're not going to be stuck with, well, this is what we put in place, this is all it can be. Because the most important thing of any parking management program is the ability to turn on a dime. Because when you implement changes, things are going to change. We pretty sure we know what's going to happen when time limits go in place and where people are going to go, but it doesn't always work out exactly the way you plan it. So what we've come up with is a program that has a lot of flexibility in it and will allow us to adjust, and the data we're going to collect from the system on a daily basis, we'll be able to see what's happening in real time. The carts and the way it all works, that cart will be able to make approximately 3 to 4 rounds of the town center every hour. So we're going to get a lot of data. And it's not giving us license plate. I'll get that out there right now. We as the system and the operator or whatever will not have that license plate information. That's in the system, and nobody has access to that. Okay, so it's not oh, we're going to have your license plate and know who you are, and all. It's not like that. So, I mean, I don't want to. I can go on and on for hours, and so I'd rather answer questions. You know, if people have any.
Okay, all right. Well, before we take questions, can we have a round of applause for our panelists, please? So, the format here is that we will collect cards if you have a question, and then we'll just read the questions from the stage. I think it'll make it a little more expeditious, and then everyone can hear the question and the answer. While they're collecting cards, I do have a couple of questions already that were just in general, and I will direct the first one to Commissioner Stinson, not because I'm just from Atlantic Beach, but so talking about the spaces that are required for our beach renourishment and that sort of thing. Thank you. You know, Atlantic Beach has had an issue with private property owners, thank you, kind of encroaching on public right-of-way spaces that was once used for just public parking. It was not typically designated as such, but they were not designated as no parking areas, and they were, you know, allowed for beach access. So has that been discussed with your committee or with the commission, as far as it's more or less an enforcement issue, I think, more than anything else, but it seems to me, particularly with some of their newest development, housing development, that's been kind of an ongoing problem that we're facing.
Thank you. So the answer to the question, has the commission had that conversation? No, there's just been, I guess, isolated comments from various commissioners about the issue. And it is a very complex problem anymore in the city of Atlantic Beach because, yes, enforcement has been lacking and encroachment has been allowed onto city right-of-way for quite some time. You look around and one block there is no parking anywhere on the right-of-way because of big rocks or big palm trees or curbs or whatever. And then the next block, the right-of-ways are open. You know that the city has a right-of-way all up and down the street. So the dilemma becomes this: do we do we go back, and I kind of alluded to this in my presentation, as a city, do we go back and do we go to these residents that through our own oversight and actually lack of enforcement, do we go back to them and say, you know, we let you do all this, we let you build this new house, and now you put in these 5 big nice palm trees that cost hundreds or maybe thousands of dollars, now you have to tear that out. Well, you're going to have a large population that's not going to be really, really happy. And then if you choose to ignore that, and you say, okay, I'm just going to let that stand, and we're not going to enforce. We're not going to go back and try to reclaim the right of way. Now you've got the other half of the population that's sitting back saying, now wait a minute, you know, I've left my right of way nice and clear. I haven't done anything to intrude on the city's right of way. And so therein is the dilemma. I think there are alternatives to either one of those that actually might make sense, that would help the city in a lot of ways. And I don't know if this is the right forum to talk about those, but I'd be happy to, Maria, if that's what you want. But it's a dilemma, and I don't know that the city actually has good direction on which way to go with that. Because the city is complicit in the whole deal. The city has, for whatever reason, decided to look the other way and let people put the big rocks and the big trees and to do these things in their right of way. So I don't think the parking committee has addressed that briefly. We have not taken it up for solutions, but I think it is on our radar, and I think it's something that you'll see and have an opportunity to offer input into in the coming year.
Thank you. It looks like a lot of the questions are really about concern of the encroachment of parking in the residential areas. People who don't want to pay for parking, people who don't want to ride around trying to find parking spaces. So this is probably for both cities as well as Consultant and Beaches Town Center. Are there any solutions to trying to not have the residential areas encroached upon for parking, for people who don't want to pay for parking?
There goes the bus. Yeah.
Just pass it on down.
That is one of the biggest issues with programs like this. It's called creep. And when they first started, this trend all started 20, 25 years ago in South Florida. And Coconut Grove was one of the first places they implemented a program to try to manage parking along the beach. And they did it right along the beach, and then they started noticing, well, now the next block off the beach, we have the exact same problem. So they started managing that block, and they just kept going block by block by block until they finally realized we need to control the whole thing. So it's, and that's what I was referring to with, you can have resident zones to where certain streets, blocks, whatever, they are resident parking only, or you can have 1 hour parking only for non-residents, or residents only after 5 p.m. I mean, there's a multitude of programs you can implement on a block-by-block basis as the need dictates. And because of the change in the beach renourishment rules, you can do that. A few years ago, you couldn't do that. Now, you can. So you can address, and the bottom line is one neighborhood is going to have completely different needs than the next. There's no one silver bullet answer for anything. So, this program, this operating system and all allows all that flexibility. So yes, there have been a lot of discussion on that actually.
Okay, this question is there any plan to maintain a valet service? How many spaces do valet services eliminate, not used, during operation of their service? Jay?
Yeah, absolutely. Valet services, valet shuttle services. anytime that we can manage the flow of the parking need, we will benefit from that. When we have a valet program, we can stack cars in a parking lot that might be marked to allow for up to 40 parking spaces. For valet services, we can get double that number into that same space. So valet services is very economical, very user-friendly, and really helps to reduce the demand. So we would like to continue to not only embrace that, but improve upon that. There's a lot of additional inventory that could be managed better, some of which has valet on it today. We see valet continuing to expand, and between the valet and the shuttle services, I'll add this piece because we've actually studied this for 5 years now, and we're working with the property owners at Kmart that we could do a combined valet shuttle service out of that lot, where we've entered into a parking lot lease agreement with them that would greatly enhance the amount of parking inventory that's available to us. We can create a very user-friendly experience of providing shuttle services from that lot down into the central business district and back. And we've taken a look at a number of different ways to do that. But valet and shuttle will be an important and integral part of that.
Okay, thank you. So I understand that the new Al's Pizza and a new barbecue restaurant just got parking waivers or variances on the basis that their customer spillover can park at this church. But I have also understand that the parking regarding the spillover to the parking solution agreements such as employees. If businesses keep getting these waivers, how will the parking ever keep up?
I'll start with this, and then Commissioner Stinson, you might want to add to it. We talked earlier about a shared parking solution, and that's what this is. I can tell you that neither Al's nor the potential barbecue restaurant has ever had any dedicated parking indicated at the Community Presbyterian Church. Our existing, this is now the Beaches Town Center agency, our parking relationship with the church is provided for employee and valet services only. And never did we ever dedicate parking in any one location. Rather, what we did is we offered a shared parking solution such that customers could park at any of the available parking inventory, and then we would provide shuttle services from that location and or valet services. And on the basis of that, both the Al's new redesign as well as the potential new barbecue restaurant were viewed as being appropriate for the shared parking solution. Now, I'd like to add to that if you think in terms of limited resources where we need to work together in a collaborative effort such that we can manage the flow of parking so that we don't have that creep, we don't have that spillover into the residential neighbor, that we actually have a plan that is logical and makes sense, and we're deliberate about our effort to manage that. As of now, the Beaches Town Center agency are the custodians of those parking agreements and maintaining that inventory. Right now, we're only talking about a total, I think, of 38 spaces that have been dedicated to the shared parking solution. We have over 400 spaces in our inventory that are active today. That's not even including the inactive spaces.
Thank you. So just a comment, a couple of comments on how that was viewed from the Commission on the City of Atlantic Beach. Both the Al's restaurant and the barbecue restaurant, what Mr. Handline is describing to you as a shared parking agreement makes great sense. But the codes in the City of Atlantic Beach do not let us do that. They don't let us use parking that's a greater distance away than a particular radius. And in reference to the barbecue restaurant, they applied for a 1,600-foot radius, I think, with the Community Development Board, and were given 600 feet. So when when we considered that, the reason it came before the commission and after being in front of the Community Development Board is they wanted to sell liquor. And to do that, you have to have 150 seats in the restaurant. And to have 150 seats in the restaurant, you have to have 37 and a half, which is actually 38 parking spaces. So we started looking at the 4 areas that were referenced in their application for this. One of them was Community Presbyterian Church. The other one was the parking lot right across the street next to McDonald's. The third was the parking lot that the barbecue restaurant intended to use on site. And then the fourth was across Atlantic Boulevard in the Kmart parking lot and the Ameris Bank parking lot. Through discussions, we learned that there was no secure parking here at Community Presbyterian Church, which created, had it been here, the barbecue restaurant would have had enough parking in Atlantic Beach to meet their 38 parking space requirement. When you look at the code of the City of Atlantic Beach, the code actually says the parking cannot be across an arterial road. And it doesn't say it can be across an arterial road if you provide valet. It doesn't say it can be across an arterial road if you provide shuttle service. It doesn't say that. And so we got to looking at this, trying to figure out how we could help the barbecue restaurant maybe secure some parking that was a bit longer distance. The commission chose not to undertake that and to accept the parking on the other side of Atlantic Boulevard. But therein lies the problem. What parking is available? How can it be used? The shared solution that Mr. Handline talks about makes great sense for what would be an overlay district for the beach's town center, but the codes of the City of Atlantic Beach just do not allow us to do things like that at the present time.
Okay, we're just about 5 minutes to ending the program, but so I'll end with a math question. What is the formula for 220 spaces generating $700,000 to subsidize the Better Jacks plan? And when does the Better Jacks plan end? And I'll add a caveat to that question, or not a caveat, but I'll add another question to that. And is there a cost share plan being discussed or already in place to be presented to the cities? Obviously, there's a cost to install the kiosk. There's a cost for the patrol to go up, to do the patrolling, and so you've got the businesses involved in this as well. And there's even one question about One Ocean. What's their role? Are they on board with this? So it's kind of a I apologize, but it's a multifaceted question.
I would say it's hard to run the math on the program because you have to plug in certain rates into it. There is a formula out there based on a certain number of turnover spaces. The math for 700,000, 200 spaces, what does that take based on your rates and your turnover, your occupancy on that one? I can tell you that it doesn't take much in the rates and the turnovers for 200 spaces to come up with that. But again, the goal of the program is, the number one goal is not to, that's a secondary piece of it. It has to pay for itself. And the future goal is to pay for the people that come down here and use the area. It shouldn't be the sole burden of the residents, even after the sunset of the Better Jacksonville plan. That money goes away. It shouldn't be the sole burden of the citizens to pay for the upkeep for everyone. We're paying for the party for everyone else. They get to enjoy down here. So it's a methodology to offset some of the costs to continue to improve town center. It's about a 10-year sunset, I believe. When that does sunset, I mean, the half-cent sales tax will continue to pay it, which will go towards solvency of the pension or the county. There's a lot of questions in there, but it's laid out. There's a business template and plan laid out there today for the city of Neptune Beach to issue the purchase order and the system and the contract. It's cheaper for one system to do that and set it up almost like a utility where we have 12 kiosks. The city will pay for the kiosks, set them out there, and then spread the cost out over the economies of scale for different. So we could go to One Ocean, or we could go to South Coast, and we could have our numbers based on all the lots, all the spaces, and divide that up among everybody to say, hey, for you to tie into this, it's going to be is pennies per transaction, and then you can, or a management fee on it after everyone gets the fee together for the whole cost of the system. So we're close to that. We really have to plug in the rates and guess on the turnover. But I mean, Mark could probably tell you more about, you know, what they generate based on occupancy and turnovers. But that answers most of the questions.
Most of the question, yes, thank you. But just one clarification, I think, and I'm sorry, I forget which panelists mentioned it, but is it clear that Beach's residents, lives in Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach, Jack's Beach, would not have to pay for parking? Is that what I heard someone say? Is that true, or?
I would say that's not clear.
That's not clear.
I mean, similar to Jack's Beach, I couldn't, as a Neptune Beach resident, go down and park in their spaces that are reserved for the Jacksonville Beach residents. Well, what we're talking about is that Neptune Beach has about 200 spaces, Atlantic Beach has about 60 spaces. Each beach has to decide what kind of discounts they're going to offer to their citizens. So Neptune Beach, for someone that registers as a Neptune Beach resident, there could be an area where they can park at no charge. You know, and as you get into that deeper, you have to look at, well, free of charge probably means free 3 hours, because you don't want someone that works in town center just to go park there or go to the beach and stay there. And you have to have certain restrictions on them to be able to use that. So on Atlantic Beach side needs to decide how they're going to manage their spaces, what kind of discounts are given, and are those shared across the residents. You know, that has not as yet to be decided. But you know, there is discussion about a discount for residents of that city. What they are exactly is kind of where we are today in the discussion.
Okay. Well, thank you again, panelists. We really appreciate this. It's been very educational. Love the fact about beachside buggies. I, for one, didn't know that that was a service that was available. I don't know, my head's been buried in the sand maybe, or whatever. But if I did not get to your specific question for the panelists, I'm sure they'll have some few minutes afterwards to talk to you one-on-one. As you can see, this is a very complex issue. Like most issues like this, there's no one answer. So it's going to take a lot of collaboration. It takes a lot of people working together from both cities, as well as the town center, and appreciate Jay and his hard work on this, and the parking committees from both of the cities, and the consultant, Mark Rimmer. So thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you're more educated in this, and you know, I'm sure they're open to hearing feedback from you guys and suggestions as this process continues. So thank you again. Have a great evening.